All right. Caroline, can you hear me? Tom, can you hear me? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We have Rosie in the room. Bill Wilson's on his way, and Bill Olson is going to be joining remotely as well. So,
I'm here.
oh, there he is. Oh, didn't realize that was you, Bill. I'm going to rename you.
Yeah, I know how to. I don't know how to change that on my phone, but yeah, that's me.
Okey-doke.
And it's like a movie.
Well, as it is 7:01, Rosie, you're going to hold down the fort there in real life.
Okay, I'll do my best, Caroline.
I believe in you. All right. Are we ready to go, Joe?
Yeah.
If and when Bill Wilson arrives, I might have him take over just because it might be easier, but otherwise I'm happy to keep going remotely. It is 7:01 p.m. and I officially call to order the Hamilton Select Board meeting of Monday, January 6th. Because we have so many remote folks, I will start with a roll call vote. Tom.
Tom Myers here.
Bill.
William Olson here.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy here.
And Caroline Beaulieu also here. We will get started with our usual board openings. We have still many opportunities to join us here running the town of Hamilton. The Council on Aging has 2 associate openings. The Cultural Council has 1 opening. The Hamilton Development Corporation has 1 opening. That's a 3-year term. And then for the Historic District Commission, we have 2 openings for 3-year terms, 2 openings for 2-year terms, one of which must be a resident of the Historic District and 1 must be a resident realtor. And lastly, we have 1 Human Rights Commission at-large opening.
Caroline, can I just correct one thing? We made a mistake in that list. The Hamilton Development Corp. Opening was filled about a month ago, so we need to remove that from the list, but everything else is right. Sorry about that.
No, just kidding. So strike that. We do not have an HDC opening. We are going to move next to board member and town manager reports. And then if folks have public comment, we will get to that afterwards. Tom, do you have any, goodness gracious, do you have any updates for us?
Nothing from me tonight, thanks.
Perfect. Bill or William Olson, do you have any updates?
I'll pass tonight.
Perfect. And Rosie, anything from you?
Actually, no, it was very quiet during the Christmas season, so I do not.
Okey doke. I just would like for the record to show that Bill Wilson has joined us in the room. Hello, Bill, and welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. This is sort of part update, and maybe we can also bring it up in new business. I did get a message from Scott Sundquist that they had sent over some updates to the development agreement draft and had requested that we make haste in reviewing those updates and working with John Whitten. So Rosie and Joe, you and I can connect later. And of course, if any other board members would like to take a look at that, also happy to include others as well.
So John Whitten shared it with me late this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, and he and I are planning to talk Wednesday morning. So I'll get that to you and Rosie tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning.
Awesome. Bill, do you have any updates to share?
Yeah, a couple quick ones. The school committee did meet on January 2nd, at which time they approved the superintendent's tentative budget. The budget totals around $46.8 million. I do know the Hamilton portion of that is 25.9, which is about a 4.96% increase. They continue to fine tune that, and I believe on February the 2nd, they will adopt and approve their final budget. They also accepted donations for the athletic fields from the Athletic Field Improvement Committee to the tune of $790,000, so that's quite a large amount. Add that to what they already had, that brings the total of donations for the project to $1.5 million of the, I think, $15 million total project budget, so about 10%. Also, save the date kind of thing for the school district on January 22nd. They will host a community forum meeting where they'll educate the public on the elementary school project. So for those interested in more information on that, I would look to go to that meeting and get some updates. CPC will meet this Thursday. They'll review their reserve situation. They'll go over a new application actually from the Hamilton Wenham Library, historic, towards a historic preservation donation, I guess, or funding to digitize Hamilton Wenham local history records. So we'll review that, get a presentation from Kim Butler Thursday at 7:30 p.m. They'll also review the open grants. You know, the CPC has done a lot of good work. Some of the open grants they'll speak to on Thursday are Town Hall renovation addition, the money they put towards that, the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District athletic facilities fields, Asbury Commons Affordable Housing Project, the Fire Department Model T building will be in the center of our town, and some housing production plan updates. So a full agenda for them on Thursday evening. So that's it.
I was saying such nice things about you, Bill, but I was on mute. If there are no more, well, Joe, separate from the finance report, do you have anything?
No, the town manager report is out among the department heads being updated as we speak. We'll have it ready for email distribution and posting to the town website on Friday as usual. That's all I got right now on that. As Rosie said, it was the holidays, so wasn't a lot
Perfect.
going on.
All right. Well, with that, I see that we have the illustrious Wendy with us today, and I think Joe and Wendy are going to walk us through the updated 2026 budget and have us go through that. So I'll turn it over to y'all.
So I'm going to bring this up on screen. While I do that, I'm going to let you know, Wendy's going to walk through the numbers on the screen here. This was a request of the FinCom chair back in December to just provide an update before we get to the actual budget presentation meeting in the end of January. So this is just kind of a snapshot of where we stand right now. I will say that this is, other than the COVID year, this is the toughest budget year we've had in my tenure here in Hamilton. I wish that weren't the case, but it is. Got a lot of challenges this year, but we think we're going to be able to make it work, assuming the school department makes some changes that they have indicated to us that they're planning to make. The budget that was discussed, I really want to apologize for using the word so I'm having trouble gathering my thoughts tonight. The school committee adopted the tentative budget last week, as Bill Wilson suggested, but according to the finance director of the schools, there'll be an update to that at the January 16th meeting, and we're expecting some movement there, which will help us. Assuming that actually happens, we think we'll be able to present a balanced budget on the 22nd as we're supposed to. So Wendy will walk through that's right now, where we're at right now. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. So yes, quick snapshot. You can see the total town expenses are 15.9 million and the school expenses are 25.4. Excuse me. You will notice that it will not match what was adopted by the school committee because we have made some assumptions that we are understanding that will take place, as Joe just mentioned. So looking at, what we're going to raise based on, we've gone through all the hearings with the FinCom, and each department has done everything they can to cut in every area that they can. And you can see the town itself is coming down 7.5% in the overall budget. So the total budget is decreasing by 2.6%, but the big chunk, as Joe said, is it's a tough year. So the school debt also does not match the school committee certification because we did not have final numbers, but that's a pass-through, if you will. So whatever the debt service increases on the operating side, also the debt exclusion will increase to capture that, and it'll absorb those costs. So we shouldn't have a problem on the debt side. And as long as the school comes in where we think they are, then we should be fine. But we've done some strategic kind of outside the box thinking here so that we do not use free cash for operating expense. And if you look at the policy, it says that we do have the opportunity to use free cash for trust and obligations. And those trust obligations are OPEB and pension. So if, Joe, did you go to the next page already? I don't know.
Just
Looking at this.
Wendy,
Okay.
I don't want to steal your thunder, but I do have a question.
Sure.
So I know that the school is a chunk, and we know that we're going to see, standard or significant increases from the school. But we keep saying it's a super tough year. Is there like a Cliff's Notes in here of what those sort of themes are that are driving that difficulty?
From the school side or from the town side?
No, from the town side.
The town went down the town's budget decreased. Hold on, I just had it in front of me. I'm sorry. 7.5%.
No, I saw that. I just wondered if we
yeah.
were having to are we making these dramatic cuts in order to account for the school budget coming in where it did?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes, Barb.
you'll notice there's no capital improvement expenses so far. Joe's evaluating the capital committee's request to see if we can add any capital improvements, and if we do, they'll be supplemented with free cash, because that's the only way we can make this balanced.
Do we have those
So does that
requests in our?
We got the capital committee report last Friday.
Okay.
Haven't had a chance to go through it with the department heads that initiated those requests. We want to go through those and understand where we're exactly at. I do want to wait to see where the school final number comes in on the 16th, so that we fully, we have all the information in front of us before we decide where to go with free cash expenditures for capital.
Yeah, because it looks like, I mean, you've assumed
sorry.
a pretty good, from what was approved on the second that I just read to, you have a much different number.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we do. And to answer your question, Caroline, the personnel expenses, if you look at 393,990, that's the biggest change in the budget. Not talking about capital at this time, but that's the biggest change. Everything else pretty much went down.
So,
Okay.
and I don't want to jump.
This
in,
is
but
on
Wendy, you can
par with
tell
our
me-
goal of, like stable services and all of that.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah,
Not to remove any public safety. Correct, Joe?
Right. The goals that were given to us by the Select Board and the FinCom in the fall were to continue to provide the same level of service that residents expect without going into an override position. So we are there. We've made cuts to ensure that we stay there. Any additional cuts would actually require a cut in services, would require elimination of positions. So as long as the school department makes the cuts or makes the changes in their budgets that they've suggested to us that they were going to make, we'll balance this year. That's-
Will you be able to outline those?
Yes, well, that'll be,
As we get to it?
yeah, we'll be able to do that at the meeting on the 22nd. That's the purpose of that meeting on the 22nd, to go through the full budget.
And the reduction on this is primarily capital, right? It's not necessarily operating expenses to fund and operate the town. It's capital expenditures, correct, Wendy, or?
Well, we have decreased a little bit in the operating, but yes, you are correct.
Yeah, it looks like the debt expense went down a little bit,
Right.
but the big.
But
is that
overall, there is an increase without the capital. Yes.
We've made some decreases in line items in public works and public safety departments. They're the largest departments.
To move pockets around.
To move, well, to trim things here, to just, they'll be a little tighter, but they'll still be able to carry out their mission, so.
Okay.
This is quite concerning, I think.
You want me to continue?
Yeah, you can go. I mean, yeah,
Okay.
please.
Okay, so then looking at free cash, so this is how we're balancing the budget with free cash, trying to stay true to the free cash policy, so 5% reserve. The certification was 4.5 million, that was on September 18th. 500,000 was in the special town meeting for the town hall project. And holding a reserve of 5%, which is a little over 2 million, allows us $1.9 million to spend on non-operating or one-time payouts, if you will. So we're following the same idea as FY25 with the retirement payout of $37,800. And and this, we're going a little bit outside the box here with the fire department lease purchases. Typically, we try to absorb those as part of the operating, but because they are actually capital purchases, we feel as though it falls in line with the policy to allow us to use free cash for that. It's $111,712. OPEB transfer of $125,000. And then we are supplementing a portion of the pension transfer, $550,000. There's a general code software, a one-time town clerk necessity to update the bylaws because there seems to be a little bit of lag in bylaw language, so $15,000 for that one-time purchase. And then to replenish the capital stabilization, $235,000. And anticipated prior year bills that I have in front of me right now are almost $9,000. So the remaining available free cash we still do have would be $900,000.
So
Is that the 5%?
Over it.
That's above the 5%.
So
That's correct.
$900,000 over the 5%, right. And that would be, the $900,000 would be the amount that we would have if we wanted to make capital expenditures in FY '26. So I would say that of the items that Wendy just outlined, the only one that's a big change from what we've done in the past is the pension transfer. Typically, in the past, we've tried our best to do that through raise and appropriate and have it come out of the tax rate. But if we do that, then, like I said, something else has to go, or we have to go to an override. So
To be clear, that dollar amount isn't greater than prior years. It's at where you're drawing from this time
Right.
because of
Yes.
the pressure on
Right.
the operating budget.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that
Yes.
is the biggest one.
Okay, so we maintain the 2 million
Yep.
and change for the 5% reserve, and then we still have this 910 that we could put towards capital to make, and still maintain our 5.
Right. And that,
Okay.
and
Sorry.
the other thing to keep in mind there is that all of the things that we're recommending to be paid with free cash are allowable under our free cash policies. We're not going outside of violating our own policies, so.
Okay.
Joe, how much of that free cash is from the last year versus accumulation of the previous year?
I didn't get that. Sorry, what was that?
How much of that free cash is from just this last year's budget, or is it an accumulation of multiple year budgets, the free cash?
Every year, free cash gets recertified, so it is sort of an accumulation, if you will. Yes.
Some of it is. We're generating, on average, we generate around $2 million a year in free cash. And so we carry $2 million, we carry around $2 million as our 5% reserve, and we generate another $2 million. And generally, we spend that. Last year, we spent the bulk of that on capital projects. But the not last year, the current year, we spent the bulk of that on capital projects, so.
So with that trending, knowing that, would we ever, or is there a benefit to carrying a 5% reserve? Is that high, or is that
No,
appropriate?
that's what we do carry.
No, I know. I mean, would we ever want to question that if we had pressure and needed more additional funds out of that 2 million we put in a pocket called a reserve?
We do that. We have a stabilization fund that's also another 5%.
So we have two.
We have the stabilization fund
Effectively,
that
we
we
have
fund, and we have the,
Yep.
we
No,
actually
I
have
get
3
it.
because we have a capital stabilization fund as well that isn't funded at that level. It's a different formula. But, at that point, you start to question whether you're overtaxing then. If you're getting into having more than 10% in reserves, then the taxpayers would be very,
yeah, I'm
very
going-
justified in questioning whether we were overtaxing, so.
I'm going the
we're
other
not.
way with it. Are we holding too much?
I think we're holding what our, what GFOA and other, the bond rating.
The
agencies
standard-
and else- The standard,
The standard is 3 to 5%.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm aware of that when we did the policy, and we're at the top end of the standard. But you also just told me we usually run 2 million under on annual budgets.
so that's because the budget is projected. So you're projecting revenues and you're projecting expenses. You get into the year, you plan to have every single person in the town fully staffed all the time at the money that we budgeted them for.
Right.
But people leave and the position sits empty. We get a deal on some equipment that we thought we were going to spend more on, or we don't have to buy as much rock salt. So we wind up accumulating savings, and that savings,
Yep,
and then if you
I
have
get it.
issues like excise tax come in higher than we projected, which typically do because we don't want to over-project. We want to, as closely as possible, be accurate with our projection, but if anything, we want to be under. So we'll project I'm just pulling a net number out of thin air, but say we project $1 million in excise tax, but we take in $1.5 million because it was a good financial year and a lot of people in town bought new cars, so we actually collected more in excise tax. That $500,000 just falls to free cash.
Sure, that's true.
Or if we get a lot of building permits in, because it's, again, in past few years, we've beat our projection on building permit fees because more people have been doing projects on their homes than we expected. So that's not an overtaxation, that's just the way the
No.
budgeting works.
I'm just, thinking about your lead-off statement, toughest year ever, and I think it compounds. 27 will be tougher. And I just want to make sure, as we allocate funds and put them in buckets, we said the range is 3 to 5. We said at 5 top end, there are moving parts. It can go the other way too, right? And we might lose money.
Yep.
And then when we tag the reserve at the time, but I'm just thinking, if there's places to pull, sources to use, much like you had to go for the pension transfer, that one
Yeah, that's-
surprises me.
Surprised me.
That was just going to be my question. Is that usual that we
It-
do a pension transfer from the?
It's not usual. It's the one on this list that isn't normal, but it is allowable.
And the fire department lease purchases, does that usually go from operating
We
expenses?
usually, we do a mix of that with our vehicles, and like I said, just because this year, we've done it in the past with police department, having police department be taken out of free cash instead of assumed inside of the operating budget. It's just a way to try to make sure we're making ends meet, again, without,
Yep. I see what you're doing. It's creative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I don't see any issues with it. I
Well, this
see.
year, but it
Right,
just gets
it's
a
a
little
house-
dicey when
it
you
could be
think
a house of
about
cards.
long-term. So, thank you, Joe.
So Joe, in terms of spending free cash, can we only do it once a year, or can you do it twice a year?
you could do it.
Anytime.
You can do it anytime you have a town meeting. Town meeting has to authorize the expenditure of free cash. And generally, our financial policies, which we followed since I've been here, I think you followed it largely before I got here, was that you spend free cash on one-time, non-operational expenses. And so that's generally what we try to do.
No, I get that. What I'm asking is if we find ourselves in a positive position before, in 6 months from now, is there any benefit to sort of spending free cash at the 6-month mark to reduce this discussion next year? Or do you really want to wait till?
Well, so it depends.
time of year.
It depends on what we do with capital. So if we decide to use any of that 910,000 that we're currently projecting as remaining on capital, and we reduce that, we'd only be able to spend that amount until the next year's free cash certification is certified, generally sometime between October and December. So we wouldn't be able to do it until we got a new free cash certification.
Right. Or and even if you change the policy, would that free stuff up?
We could, so, in a dire emergency, like the sky is falling and we need to put a new roof on the public safety building or something, the select board and town moderator could call a special town meeting, we could go and we could violate our policies and use some of the 2.019 or dip into the stabilization fund.
Right.
We just
We
need-
have some pockets.
We just need to have a
FinCom.
plan. We have to have it approved at town meeting, and then you just,
Yeah, we did. I think 24, our kind of benefit was ARPA funds. We drew from that. We're not going to have that again. And so we had that as kind of our pocket of money to go at. That's gone, right? So, it could, yeah, okay. I'm just lining up. This is our first discussion, and you guys are doing a great job, and I see exactly what you're doing here. I echo your challenge and remark.
You have to protect your bond rating.
Yep.
So if you start to press against your policy amounts,
So would changing from 5 to 3, I'm not even suggesting it, I'm just throwing paint on the wall, would that potentially change our bond rating?
yeah,
Yes, could. It could come into play.
We benefit from having a AAA bond rating. We get
Yeah,
a better interest rate
borrowing
than a lot of
rates,
other
all
communities
that.
around us.
Understood.
And, yeah,
A bond
Is
rate.
Dumbledore speaking in the audience?
yes.
Oh, if he says anything we need to hear, will you just repeat it? We can't hear him.
He suggests that we need to make sure that we protect our bond rating.
Bond rating,
Yeah, okay.
And we do that with the
Absolutely.
5%.
Right.
I mean, I would push it back against that if we were pressed to see if that would do that, but if, I don't doubt it. It definitely adds security and a safety blanket that assures a bank or an institution, these guys can pay their bills, they have pockets. right?
Certainly, yeah, exactly. And certainly, there are times when it can be explained, and the bond rating agencies won't hold it against you. But you have to be clear that this wasn't a mistake in projecting, it wasn't a poor budgeting decision or an ignorance of what was coming, so.
And Joe, these amounts here that will be retrieved from free cash, these are one-time yearly amounts?
Yep.
You don't anticipate that there'll be another, okay.
Nope.
I don't know if Wendy's done on that, but is there anything on revenue and any surety on those numbers?
When do you want to make
Go to
any?
I'm
previous
thinking
slide,
state,
Joe.
local, all that type of stuff. Is that all assumptions or done or?
We typically look at the last 5 years and estimate what the, not estimate, but we look at the last 5 years of revenue and see what the increase in revenue has been from year to year and try to hit that
Yep.
as we project for the next year. But you always try to be conservative in that and temper it, particularly if you think you're going into a tough economic climate. We've been in a position where the economy's been strong, despite the fact that inflation's been high and people are feeling it in their wallets. We've still had, the last few years, as I said, people doing a lot of projects in their homes, buying new cars. We're starting to see that soften in the real time right now. And so that makes you say, okay, we're not going to project the same amount that we got in excise tax last year. We're gonna project maybe only what we projected, because just because we beat it last year doesn't mean we will next year.
Right.
So we are holding the same local receipts. We did evaluate it, and there are some differences in some areas, like, for example, the intermunicipal agreements. So we're not going to collect as much because we don't have the same agreements coming up. But we decided to hold the same amount, and the investment income is actually helping us carry that amount, just so you know.
Oh, good. What about local aid, state local aid? Is that an actual number or is that an assumption?
No, House One won't be out
That's
until
an actual estimate from the state.
Yeah, it's an estimate from the state, but House One budget, the governor releases usually right before the MMA convention at the end of the month. That'll be February 23rd or 24th this year. I'm sorry, January 23rd or 24th this year, later this month. And we won't have a first take at what local aid will be until then. The good news is that first take at the budget, unless the economy crashes, is usually pretty close to what the legislature passes, at least as far as local aid. Lots of other things change in the budget process, but local aid's usually pretty close to what the governor projects.
I
So,
agree. The schools probably have that same estimate, same
Yeah.
time frame, right?
yeah,
Okay.
they'll get the same look at Chapter 78 the same way.
Okay, so this is probably showing my nascence in these complicated financial issues. But debt exclusions seems to be much lower. Why is that, Wendy?
So when I reached out to Hilltop Securities to get the numbers for the school department, because they were not ready yet, they did not want to give me the principal amounts on the band for the fields, because they were not certain if the school department was actually going to pay back the principal. So if we were to include that in debt exclusion and include it in the operating, if we actually were not able to exclude the debt, the operating would fall to free cash, but then we'd be over capacity in our two and a half prop. So that's why I left it conservative at what I do know. But now, since we have the January 2nd certification, it feels like we are more certain that they will pay back the principal and that number will go up, but also the operating will. So it will not change the overall.
So this is
that
where
makes-
the athletic fields debt exclusion is reflected
Right.
for the town of Hamilton?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So what you're seeing there is principal and interest for all of the other bans and bonds, and only interest for the athletic fields right now. So I will add the principal, and then I'll put it in the operating as well.
Do you have any idea roughly what that will be?
Yes, I just got the information. I believe the principal is another 900,000, give or take. Yes.
Okay, so it's going to be pretty comparable to what the FY '25 budget.
It should be, right, yes.
Wow, okay.
Does anybody have any other questions about the preview that we just went through?
Nope.
We'll say that there is another 5 boards meeting scheduled for, John, help me, it's January 15th?
Sorry, Joe, I had one more question. I didn't hit mute fast enough.
Sorry, sorry, Bill.
Sorry, one more question. In terms of negotiating any with unions, how many unions do we have to negotiate with next year?
No, we negotiated all 5 contracts at the end of last year, so we're in year 1 of 3-year contracts for all 5 unions. We have known employee expense for the next 2 years.
Okay, that's great.
The next 5 boards meeting is going to be Wednesday, January 15th at the schools. And by then, the next night, the school committee will get an updated version of their proposal according to the superintendent. And a few days later, I'll be presenting to you the full version of this budget here. I was going to wait till new business to bring this up, but maybe if it's all right with the board, I'd suggest now that we could have a quick conversation. The January 22nd joint meeting date with the FinCom we have 2 conflicts. One, obviously, the school department is going to have their elementary school thing that night, but also the planning board has their regular scheduled meeting, and they'll be in this room. So, because that meeting's on a Tuesday night, not a Monday night, we are trying to see if it's possible to do the meeting at the community house, for our meeting at the community house, or we could go all Zoom. I'd like to know the board's preference, but I'm not sure that the community house is available yet. We've inquired and have not heard back yet.
And this is just with the FinCom?
The joint meeting with you and the FinCom to do the budget presentation.
I thought the community forum's the 22nd.
Yep.
Yep. So is your joint meeting, budget?
Meeting's the 21st.
No.
I think we should have community
The
house as an
21st
option. I
is
think
a
that's a great idea.
holiday.
Planning board's on the 21st, according to this.
But that's a holiday,
Monday,
isn't it?
that's the typo. The Monday
Okay.
is a holiday.
Okay.
Monday, the 21st is a holiday, so we can't have a meeting that night. So the select board had voted to move that meeting date one day to the 22nd, but then that put us in conflict with the planning board because that's their regular meeting date.
No, Monday is the 20th.
Monday's the 20th, Tuesday the 21st.
All right.
Tuesday's the 21st.
I may be misspeaking the dates, but the Tuesday is the day that you're meeting. That's the same day that the planning board meets. So they have that room for for that night. If I misspoke the date, I apologize. But we've inquired with.
My preference would be to keep the date and try to find a room. I feel like once we start moving dates around again, people have difficulty.
Well, the other option is to do the meeting entirely on Zoom.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess that's, if we can't do the community house, that's fine with me.
All right.
How other folks feel, I'm not trying to unilaterally make a decision, but
Yeah, I think community house is a great idea. We've always talked about them being a resource for us, so let's see if we can use it. Otherwise, I agree we should keep the date and put it on Zoom, but let's start with the community house.
All right, we'll try to get the community house. Just bear in mind that meeting won't be able to be hybrid. It will be able to be broadcast, but it won't be interactive because we won't have the equipment that we have here. So that was just.
yeah, I mean, I think the challenge there is that I find the conversations to be more active and fruitful when we're all together.
I agree.
But I accept that the sacrifices, maybe like less of the community can be there, but I think we just have to decide at this stage of things, which of those is more important. I don't know that I have the answer, but.
All right, we'll aim for the 21st at the community house, unless for some reason that room is unavailable that Tuesday night. And the backup would be to do it all on Zoom. Thanks. Thank you.
Are we done here? Is this the end of our preview?
I think we are.
It's up to you.
Yes, that's all we have today.
Not that it wasn't the trailer of my dreams, Wendy. I don't want you to feel like it wasn't the greatest thing I've done. Okay. Well, with that,
There's a question from the
we
audience.
do have.
There's a Caroline,
yeah.
there's a question from the audience.
Okay.
Ask that about the numbers?
Sure.
Deb Safford, just a quick question. So I'm just curious, how do we do a 7.5% decline and maintain services is that because because I don't see actuals, it's just budget to budget, as opposed to sort of actual, budget to actual, and then actual to budget, where you can see, so is it that we're
Well, in the
under,
year-over-year,
in
it'll
the
always be,
actuals?
in the year-over-year, it'll always be budget to budget, because we're still in the middle of the current fiscal year, and we
Yeah.
don't have actuals, we don't have full actuals for the whole year, so I can't compare that right now. I'm in a position where I have to project based on our current budget. But I think Wendy outlined a lot of the reduction in actual spend was in capital. We're not right now currently not projecting to make any expenditure in capital. If we do, it'll be out of free cash.
So is that 7.5% then reflected in the 2 million that's in the free cash that's over?
The 2 million free
The 2
cash.
million over.
So 2 million we carry in free cash year to
Yep,
year.
yep.
over-
But
and
then
that-
there's
and
the
that-
extra.
That's extra, and then there's usually somewhere between
Yeah.
$1.5 million and $2.5 million
Yeah.
extra that we can play with.
Yep.
I hate to use that word, but that's available for us to take care of other requirements. And we're proposing, we're going to be proposing to use some of that for things like the OPEB, the stabilization
right.
funds. And what's left will be what we decide if we want to put forward some capital. But right now, we're showing a reduction there, largely based on not doing any capital. Wendy, what else am I missing? Some cuts in departments, line items.
I think that seems to be about
It's
it.
just an
No, but the
interesting
capital is
number
the
that
big-
it's
is the big,
7.5 and it's still steady
The big reason
services.
for the reduction.
It's all capital. I mean,
Yeah, so,
operating expenses
So-
to provide services
The
actually went up
biggest,
by
the biggest change we made was that we moved $550,000 that would normally come out of tax, raise and appropriate, out of taxes, out of taxation.
into free
and-
cash.
and
Right,
and
right.
taking it out of free cash.
So I guess that's sort of where my question is the schools are kind of doing the same thing, where they're taking their excess and deficiency and they're applying it to operating expenses. Basically, they're taking that thing to mask what the true cost is so that there isn't an override, because they're being told by the towns to not have an override because we don't have a stomach for it because of the school vote. So I think that there's an interesting kind of interplay that's going on where towns are kind of turning themselves inside out to make sure that the school vote will look appealing. And I question sort of that, and I know that it's this group that kind of sets what the agenda is for what the town should do. And I know that Mr. Tracy said that he's, trying to do that because the town is asking the school to not do an override because it will put in jeopardy theoretically the vote for the school. So I just wonder about sort of the fiscal responsibility overall of the town and the school. I would say the same thing to the school for taking things that are operating expenses and masking it with overages that we happen to have. I think it's really risky. And I think the risk of having major overrides in the next year, especially in the school where we know that there's built-in teacher raises and other union raises that are built in that are known, and they're masking it with this free cash, this kind of slush fund for a one-time hit. And I think we're kind of doing that as well, because I think it was stated that we wouldn't have done that 550,000 out of free cash, but we have to not have an override. So I just think that there should be transparency about really what the costs are for running the town and what the school is doing. I think it's got to be transparent. We cannot, I don't think our town should be playing games with money and masking the real cost of things to effectuate a vote to something. And I know you're not responsible for the school thing, but I know that they're responding to doing that, or they're blaming you for doing that by saying, well, the towns are telling us that we can't do an override, so we're going to have to do this. And so it's like people are pointing fingers at each other, all because of the school vote. And
So can we comment? Because I got lots of good things to say here. So
Yeah, one second, Bill. I do want to separate the two things though, because the paving the way for the school vote is conjecture. That is your opinion on this. Overrides are a big issue. That's a thing that comes up every year that the towns don't want. I mean, we've had lots of campaigns in the past about not an override. And when we talk about transparency, when we had the first 5 boards meeting in December, we showed the full scope of the budget and what it would cost. And one of the big things that came out of that was whatever we do, and this was not to pave the way for the school vote, it was we cannot have an override. That was sort of the thing. And so it was, how do we start cutting and getting this? But there was lots of transparency there. There was we said to everybody, there's a $5 million gap here that we have to figure out. And we had to figure out how to pay for these things without adding additional tax burden to the town. So I appreciate and understand much of your commentary, and I think that you're right that we do need to be transparent, but I don't appreciate saying that it's because we have an alternative agenda in order to make the school vote look good. Because candidly, Deb, you were at the meeting at the Buper School, and you saw that all of these numbers were out there, and the inflations of these budgets were there. We talked about the increase in salaries and the increases in insurance costs and how all this was happening. So there's been a lot of transparency, and the ways in which we have cut and moved money around has been very transparent.
Please hear me, I do agree with you on that. And I think that it has been a very apparent discussion. I'm just saying that for people that are seeing this budget now going forward, we need to have transparency about the consequence for next year, that we're doing things now. And it was said in all these meetings, we can't do an override and have a school debt vote at the same time. That was stated, that we can't afford a town override when we have the school building going on at the same time. I heard that multiple times. And so I think that's why I'm saying that it seems like there's then that motive to make sure that we do everything that we can to not have an override because we know we have the school vote. So I'm just responding to that, because I do appreciate it has been transparent. That's why I can say what I'm saying, because I am seeing it. I'm just worried about the consequence into 27 when we have known expenses. And, Dana did that little chart thing, in that meeting about, the money's, this is where we have to be. And then next year we're going to be here. So if we bury this, by doing the excess and deficiency, then the next year we're going to have this huge amount. And I think that's the concept that I just hope gets visibility, so that there's an understanding that while we're being, we're begging and borrowing to not have an override this year, the consequences might be a bigger one next year. That's all.
Can I just real quick make just a quick statement? I appreciate everything you said, Deb. I understand the concern. I have the same concern. All right. I'm the one proposing this. I have the same concerns. The problem is, it's not just my job has nothing to do with making the school vote look good. I have no interest in that one way or the other. I'm on the school building committee because I have to be. I've given my advice to them. But my goal would always be to balance the town's needs against its resources as best we can. And currently, we've been asked I was asked back in the fall, again, separate from the school vote, was asked by the select board and the FinCom to try to put together a budget that maintains our current level of services, no cuts, if we can do it, without an override. I wouldn't normally propose $550,000 from free cash to do retirement, but that is a way that I can meet that request.
I understand. Yep.
And yeah, you're right. I've said it. I've already said it to the board. FY27 might be even tougher, and it might require us to either make cuts or do an override. But I wouldn't propose to do either of those things until we had absolutely done something like this and made sure that we had done everything else to avoid either of those outcomes. Because I think that's the responsible way to go forward. If we know that we're generating X amount of dollars because we're sound budgeting policies and we get lucky and we manage our budgets so we don't spend as much as we project and we take in a little bit more than we plan, the minute we have a bad year and we don't take in more, those things disappear.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm keeping the 5% in the free cash and the 5% in stabilization, I feel like everything else is fair game.
Yep.
Because that's the best way for me to make the best use of your tax dollars. Is that fair?
That's right.
Sure.
Yeah, Joe, I think that's,
May I?
yeah, Joe, I think this is Bill. I think that's fair. I also think, I just want to comment on the fact that although all these are great concerns, characterizations, there's got to be careful with characterization. I mean, we talk about overrides, for the last 6 years, we talk about avoiding an override. And if we went through our first past budget over the last years, every year we would have had an override. So we start with a budget and we work our way down to it. So it has nothing to do with any school votes. We discuss overrides every single year, and we have for the last 6 years I've been on the board. So I want to make sure you understand, like, it's something we talk about and target every year to avoid the override and be creative with our budgets. Cannot have it. So there's nothing to do with a school vote. So it's just part of the budget process.
So, may I?
Yeah, another speaker.
Lisa Terranova, Hamilton. I think I can shed some light on what Caroline and Deb were both saying. So with the quintuple board meeting and the school committee subsequent to the quintuple board meeting, Assistant Superintendent Vinnie Leone got up and he showed the budget. He does an incredible job. And he showed that with the union contract signed, I think 1.1 million is coming in from the FY25 budget, but 1.3 million will be needed in the FY26 budget, 27 budget, which is actually calendar year 2026, which would be July 1st of this coming year. He stated that that would be 70% of the increase in the school budget. He said historically, when you have a debt exclusion and an override in the same budget, historically both fail. Because you're going to need 8 votes. You're going to need Hamilton to pass the debt override, the debt exclusion, the override, and then at the ballot box, and Wenham's going to do the same thing. So the probability of all of those things passing is very slim. So after those 2 meetings, we didn't hear any more about having a debt exclusion and an override in the same year. There was a FinCom meeting in Hamilton held shortly after that, and Wendy, who also does a phenomenal job getting all these numbers together, was talking with the head of the FinCom, the chair of the FinCom, and she laid out what Vinnie had said. And the chair of the FinCom was also adding in some other numbers. And Wendy, very honestly, because she does an excellent job, said, yes, but you have to tell the public, if we don't have the override for the COLA this year, that it's coming next year. Those contracts are signed. That 1.4 million has to come from somewhere. And the response from the chair of the FinCom was, well, how can you be sure of that? Now, Vinnie Leone also said that if the override for the union contracts fails, we are looking at eliminating 20 teacher positions. 20 teacher positions, which, if my math is correct, is about the equivalent of all the teachers at Bucher. I think what Deb is getting at is that there's got to be more transparency. Every town board, the select board, the FinCom, the school board, is doing an excellent job at getting their budgets down. But nobody's connecting the dots for the taxpayer, and nobody's saying, look, we can drop it this X percent this year, but we're gonna have hell to pay in fiscal year 2027. Where is the money coming from? How are we expecting to pay for all of this? You're going to have people thinking, okay, we'll do the debt exclusion. I mean, debt exclusion, that doesn't even explain what it is. It sounds like you're excluding debt somehow. You're not. In the same meeting, the chair of the FinCom said that the new school would add 10% to everyone's tax rate. 10% to our tax bills. And that's not a one-off. That's not a one and done. That gets baked into our tax rate.
For 20 years, and then for the term of the debt.
Exactly, right, whatever that would be. But I'm not young. I'm not going to see the end of that debt. Maybe you will, but I'm not counting on that, okay? Then when you get to an override, which again, we either have the override for the schools or we lose those 20 teachers. And it's going to be great to have this brand new school minus the 20 teachers. How do you do that? So nobody's going to want to say no to that. So you're taking again from the, in all honesty, if we're going to speak plainly, the school budget is gutting these 2 towns. Where do we go from here? We're going off a fiscal, we're not on a precipice anymore. We have fallen off the cliff. I don't see how you reconcile these things. we keep asking the same people for more and more and more. And if the people had all of the information in front of them, I think they would make different decisions. And I think that's what Deb was driving at. Because people are very, very busy. We get into town meeting and we look at the booklet that comes and we see, okay, FinCom says favorable vote on this and Select Board says favorable vote on that. And that's usually how people vote. And yeah, you can say, okay, we're going to strip 7.53% from our operational budget this year. But you can't, I mean, we can't think that next year we're going to be able to do the same. People don't even understand the concept of free cash. I mean, listen to that. Free cash. It's neither. It's neither. It's coming out of our pockets. We all have huge bills to pay. It's very, very frustrating, and I think we have got to be responsible. I know it's not your purview, but one board, some board, all the boards, we have to be responsible. We have to connect the dots for the taxpayers. So when they get out of town meeting this year, they know what's going to happen to their tax bill. They know that when you get out on April 5th, 2025, by September of 2025, you may be facing that override to pay the teacher COLA. And if it's not going to be in September of 2025, it's going to be in April of 26. It's coming. It's there. We can't not pay them. Or you've got the system. The only other thing I'm going to add, and this just goes because it's, you know, we're just getting off the Christmas season. Eric Tracy sent his usual email and before the end of the year, and in the email it talked about Accord and what a great resource Accord is for our community. And thank God we have it. He mentioned that Accord's numbers are 1 out of every 10 families in Hamilton is facing food insecurity, and 1 in every 12 in Wenham is facing food insecurity. So if there were 3 more people in this room, or if we include the people on Zoom, that means one of us is availing ourselves of Accord. And thank God we have that. But how can we as a community expect people? What it means is that there are children going to bed hungry in Hamilton and children going to bed hungry in Wenham. How can we expect their parents to take on this added burden of the taxes? Because even if you rent here, you're going to be paying that, right? So are we expecting them to say, okay, do I heat my house this week, or do I feed my child dinner this week? I mean, this is crazy. How did we get to this point? I understand we don't want to have this override this year, but really, we have to ask ourselves, what is really pushing the reluctance for the override? We've had overrides before, and if this is such a horrible year, I'm not speaking very well at this point, but
No, you are.
if it's such a horrible this year, we know next year's going to be much worse. We need to put the brakes on for a minute. We need to have the school committee look at what it is they're asking us to do. And again, you know, everyone, I just want to say, my hat is off to everyone on these boards. I've listened to the Wenham FinCom. They're incredible people. Same with Hamilton, the select boards, the school board. We have incredible brain power in these 2 towns. I just think we can put it to better use.
Thank you for that. I mean, I don't want to just, and I mean, I think candidly, like everybody on the board has shared these feelings, has had these feelings, has wondered about it. I think, you know, we are in constant communication. As you know, you've been to the meetings with the school committee. And I think one of the things that many of us are challenged by, and this is sort of a philosophical thing, is that, you know, the capital investment into a new school, many feel is a way to set us up for more long-term financial viability, right? And do you take that cost to, you know, stop the little bleeding of other things? There's disagreement about that. I'm not even saying one direction is better than the other, but I agree with you that, you know, at some point to understand like all the things that need to be fixed and all the things that need to be serviced and all the things that we need in this town, you know, do we keep doing them little by little and incrementally, and we're the frog in the pan, or do we, jump in the hot oil? I don't know the right choice. And I think we are doing our best. I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm also buoyed by the fact that, like, y'all have this information because you've been at public meetings. And so I think it is being talked about. I think the question of, like, how do we better connect those dots? I don't know the answer to that either, because, as you see, like, we're all talking until we're blue in the face, about this, and we're showing it. But, school-driven overrides are particularly difficult because they don't show up as tax overrides for the school. They show up for overall budget overrides for the town. And so it's a very interesting relationship that the school can be driving the override, but it's the town that has to ask for it because we vote for the school budget within the overall budget. And so, there's been a lot of conversations over the years of, could we pull the school budget out? And there's not really a great way to do it because, as you said, like, it has to be voted on by multiple towns. And if you pull it out, somebody makes a motion to push it back in. And so the accountability that we have with the school is only as good as the relationship that we have with the school, which fortunately right now we have a really good one. And things have been very good, but I just want to acknowledge that it's a struggle for us because the school doesn't have to ask for an override. The town does. And so what happens is the bigger the differential on the school side, the more that the town has to acquiesce to get that money out. And that's where you see sort of the creative accounting that Wendy and folks have done. But it's not perfect. And I appreciate the dialogue and open to ideas if folks have them for how we continue that conversation.
Well, I think my comment would be that it is time to address these issues head on, and how much more can we squeeze taxpayers. And I'll tell you just a little story. I have a friend who's looking for a house locally, and there was this gorgeous house in West Newbury, 3 acres, 5,000 square foot house. When we look at the taxes, my taxes on my .15, 1,400 square foot house were a mere $2,000 less in Hamilton than this luxurious, amazing house in West Newbury. And I agree that we need to start thinking about what we need versus what we want and what we can afford. And that's the reality, and it goes not only for us. I'm quite frankly not happy about the fact that we thus far don't have any items in our capital budget, because that's important. We need to maintain our town, we need to renovate, and we need to do things to preserve our town. And so I do worry that maybe we sell ourselves short for the sake of the school district. So I'm just going to say it. And that concerns me, because I think the school district perhaps sometimes forgets just what a financial burden these asks are on taxpayers. And of course, any parent who loves their child is going to want things for their children. But I say children don't really care about a big fancy school. Children care about having their local friends around them. They care about having a teacher who's providing what they need, and they need a functional building. And we just keep believing that more and more is going to solve our problems. And I, for one, think it's not. And I think we need to start looking at realistically what taxpayers can afford. When I think about vis-a-vis a beautiful, amazing house in West Newbury, taxes, and the taxes that I pay on my little tiny, adorable, but nonetheless, like, you could fit 5 of my houses in this house in West Newbury, and you have to scratch your head. Anyhow, that's my comment.
Not that I want to belabor the conversation, but I do think part of our challenge is that all the folks that are involved in these conversations, Select Board has the job of trying to make sure that the town government has what it needs to do its job. You're hearing from your constituents about the types of services that you want. Several of you come to me every year, ask me to make investments in some places. No, it's tight. This school committee is doing the same thing. They're hearing from a different constituency. And everybody has the right to have their opinion about what they think is the priority, and we all have to come together. What comes out of this is that through this kind of brokered system, we get to a point where we propose a budget, and we're trying to meet your request and be balanced and not be override and still provide the same services. If we have to go to an override, the concern for me as a town manager is that typically, when you go to an overrides, quite frankly, schools get what they want, and the town side doesn't always get what it wants. So I'm gonna do everything I can, for as long as I can, to avoid having to go to an override, because then I know that we're making decisions, the department heads, the select board, the FinCom, myself, are working together to make decisions that we think that have the best chance to provide you with the level of services you've come to expect and that you want. We have to make compromises in that. But the minute we get to a point where we propose an override, I have to have two budgets. I have to have the override budget, assuming everything passes, and then I have to have another one that cuts out the money that's in that override budget, because if it doesn't pass, the next day I have to have that other budget approved, and that's cuts. So I'm always trying to avoid the override. That's always my perspective. And yeah, it's a hard thing to do, and it's compromises that get made. Some years are easier. Last year, we were kind of surprised. We rolled up our sleeves and things went pretty well. This year's not that same story. We'll keep doing it, and we're trying our best to be as transparent as possible. I think it shows that we're being transparent because folks like you come here, you're knowledgeable about the situation we're in. I understand and hear where you're coming from, but we just have to be cognizant of the fact that there's another group of constituents out there that have a different set of priorities and a different set of goals, and we have to always trying to balance that.
One really quick thing, Joe. The amazing thing to me is that we as the town, there's no oversight for the district. I mean, twice we voted money to repair the roof of the high school. Twice those monies were used for something else. So now the superintendent is talking about the MSBA has tapped us on the shoulder and we can do another debt exclusion to get that roof. Well, we could have gotten the roof before we voted money for it. But, right, we don't even know where it went. And I'm not, you don't have to answer this. It's not a question for you. It's not. It's just pointing out what makes your job more difficult even. Because this happens and there's no recourse. There's nothing we can do. The boilers failed over Christmas break at the high school.
Yeah, I heard.
And they knew this was coming because they're on their last legs, but, their eyes seem to be somewhere else rather than what's in front of us.
Infrastructure.
Unfortunately, because we have a regional school district, our ability to provide oversight is limited, much more limited under state law than it would be if the district was within the town. But the towns made the decision starting in 1959 and then enhancing and improving it in 1972 and every year since then. So it is kind of what it is. Even in a situation where the municipality and the school district is under the municipal management, they still get a bottom line budget at the end of the day. But there's even less connection in a regional school district. It's just the situation we're in. We actually do have a discussion about the regional agreement coming up prior to the next 5 chairs meeting next week. So we'll talk about all those things too.
Right, but just the reality of the situation is just because we are in a regional school district, I mean, the way that things are developing now, occurring now, is not necessarily what the intent was in 1959 when it was formed. There's absolutely no fiscal accountability to the taxpayers. There's a handout every year. Oh, we need this and we need that. Well, maybe we need to think about what the entire towns need and not just a portion of that. It's very frustrating. I'm not a finance person. I don't understand a lot of this nomenclature, but I understand my tax bill, and I understand the fact that we don't have any money for capital expenses because we're trying to accommodate for a very big need, a very big ask. I'm not going to say a need, a very big ask. And I for one, I'm not speaking for the board, but if you don't start to expect the largest beneficiary of our tax money, if you don't begin to expect some true accountability and transparency and fiscal responsibility, when do you ever do it? If you don't start now and say, we can't always take the hit to accommodate what the schools would like, and I know that the town does that. And Joe, you do a wonderful job of cutting our budget and trimming and cutting corners. And I have a problem with the way the town has cut its corners this year. I have a very big problem with that. Specifically, no capital budget items. That makes me,
Again,
I would just add.
we're not there yet. The budget isn't set yet.
I know.
I want to see the capital.
Still have 2 weeks.
I think we're forgetting we're redoing a beautiful town hall. We're spending a lot of money that would be deemed capital in most budgets. I know, but I'm saying you're making it sound like we're not doing anything. We're spending a lot.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, I want to talk about the projects we've done in
Let's not
our
forget
community in the
that,
last
the
year.
life and the debt.
It's amazing how much work we've done. So I don't want
couple things, 'cause I agree
to let
with
the
that.
public think we're not doing anything, so.
Right. So that's all, that's why I said
Yeah.
that too. I'd love to see the capital, even
Yeah,
if
we'll-
what's proposed, because to your point, I don't want to go without either, because you were trying to, balance budget. I see you're delivering the same services, right, with all that. We're reducing the capital on other projects. Let's see what they are, and let's have a discussion about them and prioritize them and bring some in if we need to. But we are in a perfect storm right now, I think, with what the schools are doing. And I'm not saying pro or con, but between, you mentioned the high school roof, and that's coming at us, the turf field that we just approved for 15 million, before, the elementary school build, and the teacher's contract on top of that now. All of those things come together. I don't disagree that this year, everyone's gonna build a budget with free cash, E&D, and these type of funds, and it'll be okay for the year. But I don't know what is gonna be done next year to fill that gap. If everything comes in to run with the 295 employees at the schools, the programs, that to me is like, and that's the connect the dot comment I like, in that how do we make sure people understand, yes, this is today and this is what we're good for, but here is what we'll deal with. We're not saying it's a reality yet, and people get creative and do things. Maybe there's some things we don't know on the school expense side budgets with the consolidations. I don't know. I do know that if you roll everything over 1 year and add the COLAs and everything else, and the schools are, it's going to be ugly for 27.
You're right.
People need to understand that.
You're right, but just,
Things should both be voted at the same time, because we're dealing with it in the time period.
Right.
Like the override and the debt exclusion. So it begs the question, which is what Deb was,
Yep, I heard.
why the reluctance for the override? That's all.
So everything's got, go ahead. First, let me hear what this young man says.
Yeah, thanks. Good conversation, a lot of energy, and I don't disagree with the points you folks are making. I'd just like to make a couple of points. For the last 2 years at town meeting, we have actually brought the schools and the town's capital together and painted a picture. Deb, I'm sure you've been out and looked at the documents. They're on the FinCom website. And basically, where all the pressure generally comes from is capital spending, the big ticket items. That's really where you're gonna get the pressure. So for the last couple of years, we have shown the appetite on both the school department and the town and explained to the taxpayers, here's what this capital item would likely do to your tax bill. What I'd like to do this year is to add a second page and shine a brighter light on the point you're making. We do feel that the probability of an operating budget override coming from the schools will happen next year.
it might come from the town.
Yeah, it could also come from the town.
Yeah.
So as FinCom, what I'd like to do is we'll reproduce our capital, which gives the full view of the town and the schools and the bill. All right, so people have seen that for 2 years in a row. And it's not just the school, it's everything. Water is my biggest concern. What are we going to need to spend for water?
Not even in these.
But we'll add a second page and shine a light on the point you're making, because we've talked about it. Do we know exactly what it's going to be? No. But, and I'll say, over the last 2 years, the percent of the town budget from the schools has gone down, because we track it. It's gone up for like 7 years in a row. In the last 2 years, it has incremented down.
Very small amounts, though.
That's only because it's enrollment of students. There's
No,
Right.
no, it's,
The dollar
no, there's
amounts.
more to the story than that, okay?
the dollar amounts are going up.
Yeah.
We may get less of
Yeah,
that
but-
total dollar.
But my point is, the percent of the Hamilton spend, school versus the town itself, the school has gone down. The curve started to bend back, all right?
You
'Cause
saying
we've-
that
we've
isn't
shown a-
100% enrollment?
We've shown a big, a bright light on it. We're tracking it.
Yeah.
So we know, so it has, the curve did start to bend. But this year, I'm willing to bet it's going to go back up.
Is that because of how they're using excess and deficiency?
No, it was the operating, yeah. So, and the other point is, when, in September, when we did the override, or the,
Didn't do it all right.
the town hall discussion,
That was a free cash discussion.
people asked in the meeting how it works. So I explained that free cash is what's left over, but it has to come to town meeting, like Joe said. So it's not a slush fund, so let's really be careful how we characterize it. The voters that get, the money that we voted, voters got 2 cracks at that money. In the original budget, we bring it to the town and ask for their approval. So those dollars get voted on twice at town meeting. All right, so it's very transparent, and we give voters a lot of opportunity to say yay or nay. And we did explain it in the meeting, because people asked me about it. So I do feel there's probably been more transparency over the last, say, 3 to 5 years than maybe the 5 years prior to that. But can we do more? Yeah. And I think a lot of energy should be directed at the school committee. Yes. Because they're all elected.
That's the wave.
They're all elected, okay?
They sit there like robots and they.
No, no, but I understand, but again,
See, we talk to
my,
these people,
my,
that's why
my
they
final
come.
comment,
why
my
we have
final
meetings till
comment
11
is,
o'clock at night.
this is a political process. This is a political process. Like these fine people up here I voted for, it's political. So that's part of the mix, so, but we'll
I
add
love your
another,
second page thought.
we'll add another layer
Yeah.
and sort of to bring that alive, so.
That'll be the dot connect.
So I just want to clarify, I do appreciate everything that you guys have done, and it is transparent, and all of this energy, I think, is directed towards the school, because you guys are doing gymnastics, Wendy and you, to make it work, and so I want to acknowledge that, because I'm sorry if the first time I spoke of it came out that way. My frustration about the transparency is because the school committee is choosing to do kind of, it feels like a shell game, because they're using operating expenses for excess and deficiency, which is supposed to be for one-time uses, not ongoing expenses. It's masking the real cost. And I think that's the transparency, because there is going to be a hit next year. So I am frustrated and concerned that people are going to go into this election thinking how fiscally responsible they are because they can manage their budget, and we're meeting it, but actually there's a tsunami that's coming, and it's from really the school, because those are fixed expenses. It's like 60 or 70% of that budget is built in. They know what those increases are. They know what the number is going to be for the majority of it. And that's got to be understood. And so people understand. And sadly, because that's the budget that's going in, it's baked in then. Like, there's no other budget that says, no, we'd rather take, a little bit of an increase now so we don't have a tsunami next year, like smoothing it out a little bit. We can't even do that because they've decided, they all voted, even though they know there's a tsunami coming. So my frustration really is towards the school committee, and if there's any way that working with them, because you guys are our fearless elected officials, to try and express that concern, because you guys are confronting the townspeople, like really, that's the energy behind here, is the concern about that masking, not you guys, so I'm sorry if it came across
Well,
that
we
way.
appreciate the frustration because we are a receptive audience here. We do encourage transparency and we want to hear from the public. So we understand that, and we also understand that a lot of your frustration is directed at the district, and hopefully you'll be able to reiterate your concerns to them again.
Yeah, because people don't always understand, the decisions I vote for today, right? Oh, I see it's not going to increase this, and everyone's clear about today, but they will impact 27, and maybe that's the second page, that we do this now, we've got this covered, but 27, this will be our challenge. It sounds like everybody here thinks that an override is inevitable.
Oy.
Well, I agree with the point about free cash is a terrible term for that. It's, the official term is actually the unexpended fund balance, which is a lot more complicated for people to understand. But the fact is, if we're not generating something there in the unexpended fund balance every year, then we're doing a very poor job of budgeting. You would all want to move to fire me and Wendy if we didn't generate something there every year. We need to. We're just good budgeting, because you can only project so much. There's going to be unknowns, and you have to handle that within the projected budget. So I think we're doing a pretty good job. That percent we're hitting is right around where we should be. But, we do things like this year, and you wonder, are we going to hit that? Are we still going to hit that next year, or is it going to be tighter? So.
Joe,
Yeah, Joe, all good discussion. I want to leave it one more thing for the record, but we also did vote.
of organizing
About-
budget every year.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Joe?
No, Bill's talking. Sorry, Bill. Could you?
Yeah, I was just say, we also did vote about 3 town meetings ago. The school put that motion that any excess cash in their budget at the end of the budget can be used for anything they wanted to use it for. So that was voted by the town. Unfortunately, we spoke against it, but the town voted for that. So it is good to at least see they're putting it back into the budget this year and not on something else. But that is something that we unfortunately did arm them with at town meeting. So it's something that
Well, that was an hour on what was supposed to be a 10-minute
we
preview.
should also be thinking about how to manage that in the future.
That's right, that was your 3 minutes, or 10 minutes, I think.
Bill, I just want to say too, I agree with you on that, and I haven't gone back to look at it, so I don't want to say anything out of turn, but the first budget item that we looked at, that stabilization fund was not being used. And I know there's, it was healthy and it was sitting there, and it was about the amount that we're looking at in our cuts. So I agree with you that there's a further conversation there around the gentle people's agreement on how that money is used and when it comes into play, because it looked like a sacred cow when I looked at it in the first budget review. All right. Well, I'm glad we had the conversation. I will, to keep us moving, we do have a public comment section.
No more.
As a reminder, public comment is 3 minutes on an item not currently on the agenda. Maybe not a comment on something already covered, but you do you. But do we have any public comment in the room or on the phone?
I think we tired them out.
You know what? Cool. So the next is the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes for December 2nd and December 16th. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Is there any discussion or amendments to the minutes provided? All right. I will take a roll call vote starting with Tom.
Tom Myers, aye.
William Olson, aye.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill Wilson, aye.
Carolyn Beaulieu, aye. The ayes have it. And on to our agenda, which it looks so short, but it's in our power how long this takes. The first and only item is reviewing opening the warrant for town meeting. So I will entertain a motion to open the warrant for annual town meeting.
I move that we open the town warrant meeting agenda.
Second that?
Should we can go ahead and open it, right? I can just take a vote on that, Joe?
Yep, you can vote to open it. You want,
Roll call, right?
roll call vote, yep.
Hey, yeah, okay. We will roll call starting with you, Tom.
Tom Myers, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill Wilson, aye.
Ellen Boyu, aye. So the town warrant is open. At this point, we will review the calendars.
Yeah,
Joe?
Well, the calendars were just there for your edification. You don't, unless you want to look at something or raise questions about it, we can go to the
Articles?
articles if you like.
The only thing is you might shift that finance and advisory. No, you're going to keep the date, just the vehicle will be different, right? On the calendar?
Yes.
Okay.
For the.
Because it does have two different dates here, you're
Yeah,
saying it's a typo.
yeah, well,
All right.
we'll get it fixed. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, so before, it's sideways, Joe, okay. I know that we had some very meaty conversations, we'll call them, about the annual town meeting and what was gonna be on there, and I think it was my understanding at the close of last year that we have officially decided not to bring 3A or any form-based code forward for the April town meeting, is that correct?
That was what I took out of it, and that's why it's not on the list right now.
And that's
I just wanted to say that out loud because I felt like we sort of left it a little bit loose. Okay, cool.
So, yeah, most of the first few articles are standard articles: election of officers, consent agenda, bills of prior year, budgets, compensation classification table, community preservation operating budget, and grant requests, capital plan, which we will have something there, stabilization fund, stabilization OPEB, all those will be free cash expenditures as typical. Hamilton Development Corporation, we have a new policy being reviewed, I believe, by the FinCom at this point that we're going to look at for, but Wendy, Wendy left? Is Wendy still here? She did a.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to point out, Wendy had done a great job going back and looking historically at what we'd been providing to the HDC annually, and kind of assessed that against the new policy that we're being asked to use to determine how much we want to dedicate to the HDC in the upcoming budget. And over the course of the entire time that the HDC has been around, we were off by about $5,000.
Nice.
So we're pretty close over time. But it was really good to get that number down and understand it. There's been some belief that we were giving them too much or not enough. We're really pretty close to what is come out as our new kind of process for determining the right amount to give to HDC every year. So we're not, it's not going to be markedly off of where we've been in the past. So. The HERO Act adoption, the HERO Act was passed by the legislature last year, I think in July. This is it's because it wasn't completed until August. This is going to be, FY26 is the first year that we could act on it, so we have it here. There's a sample language from the state already and an IGR that basically tells us how to put this forward before town meeting, but it will provide a tax benefit to veterans, veteran homeowners in the town. We know that there's going to be a consolidated elementary school proposal. Where else? There are 6, these are actually really 5, but there are several potential zoning articles. We're not sure which of these will definitely come through. I expect that the accessory dwelling units bylaw will be there, and probably something about the GPOD. There are some there's a potential for some changes to the inclusionary housing bylaw and site plan review bylaw, and potentially a request by the planning board to address some errors. But this gets a little bit to what Wendy was talking about earlier. We're going to go along and propose that we do a general code update for the town's bylaw on the website so that it gets done and then can be updated more easily going forward. The last time that the bylaw was updated, I think, was in 2018 before I got here, and that version that is on the website doesn't exactly reflect what was voted at town meeting. So that's part of the reason we need to make this adjustment, but Mark Connors is working on that now, so we should be able to pull that all together in time for the annual town meeting. And currently, that is all we're showing. Now that you've opened the warrant, there may be citizen petition questions that come forward. articles that may wind up being considered, and of course, there may be other things that could come up. As Caroline noted, the Gordon Conwell has finally gotten back to us with their ideas about our proposed development agreement, so that may or may not result in zoning either for this town meeting or potentially for the special when we have it.
Yeah, I think the feeling in general of the planning board is that their plate is very full with their
Yep.
requirements as described
Yeah, I
here.
just don't want to, I don't want to speak for them, just say, leave it at that. That's out there. Maybe something else that comes up, may not be.
So at this point, I guess the question is there anything that is not here that folks expect to be here?
Don't everybody talk at once.
Yeah, not all at once.
Well, what are the actual votes the school impacts will be made? I mean, this list has the consolidated elementary school proposal and budgets in general. So is there a specific votes? What will the schools be asking everybody to vote on? I think we should.
Yeah, they'll be proposing a design for an elementary school that will then have to be, it will have to pass both town meetings and both ballot boxes.
Okay.
So they will be required to form provide us with the form of the article. It will adhere to what MSBA and the state require it to adhere to, and it will match what the language on the ballot question is. I believe, if I'm looking at the calendar here, I think you're going to have to approve the ballot language question and the article by late February.
That's early.
Or, I think it's by late February.
And Joe, is the town meeting vote
Yeah, 24th,
two-thirds? The town meeting vote is two-thirds and the ballot box is majority, is that correct?
Yes, be two-thirds on the, I believe, because it's going to require borrowing, so it would be a two-thirds vote at town meeting, and then a simple majority at the ballot box.
Okay.
So that's the elementary school piece. And then
Yeah.
is there an up and down on the budget or the contracts or what else?
Well, the budget will be one article, as it usually is, when both us and the schools and the FinCom will all get up and speak to the budget and what's in it and what isn't in it, and
So somebody would have to pull that out to talk about it, or Eric will proactively do a report?
no, so the last few years, we've had the opportunity, we've given the school district the opportunity to speak about their budget. Myself and the finance director speak about the town's request. FinCom gets up, delivers its recommendations on those budgets, and we take questions, and then we vote it, so.
No, I'm familiar with that. This is the connect the dots
Yeah.
opportunity.
So that would be the opportunity for John or Eric or both to connect that dot and let people know what's coming.
Okay.
Seems like.
All right. I mean, there's nothing else to do here unless we, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Unless there's something missing. So yeah, as we get, if any, citizens petitions, now that opens.
Yeah.
And then
So
we'll go through the
I
process.
believe we're scheduled to have closed the warrant at the first meeting in February, I think February 3rd maybe. And then that would be the deadline for citizen petition questions. So we should have all the articles by that date.
All right.
Looks good.
Any new business?
All for the April 5th, right? That's our
All for the April 5th. You got it.
T-minus.
Anybody have new business?
So the Gordon Conwell was mentioned. I walked in a few minutes late. So will that come as to review anything on that, or?
So at this point, it'll probably come back to an executive session vote of the select board at some point. At this point, the select board had voted back, I think in October, for Rosie and Caroline to work with me to represent the town's interest in those discussions, and that's where we're at. We had provided the seminary with a proposed development agreement, I think in November, and we finally got their red line comments back to that. John Whitten had a conversation on our behalf as directed by Rosie and Caroline and myself. And we'll be reviewing those red line comments and trying to get them to you folks for a fuller discussion at some point.
Perfect.
There's still more discussions to be had, from what I understand, right?
It seems, like I said, I just got it this afternoon, haven't had a chance to
haven't
really.
seen it
I particularly with anything legal, because I'm not an attorney, I like to read it, think about it, and then go back and read it again before I really opine. So I'm just gonna wait to say anything publicly, so.
Yeah, no, of course, of course.
Yeah, I would also just, shout out that, Rosie and Joe in particular have just been incredible advocates and tireless in this process. And it's been long, but I have been very encouraged by the conversation and the amount of, back and forth that we've had. And I don't know where it's going to end up, but I think that I feel everybody's been very well represented, and Rosie has done a great job in coordinating a lot of those conversations. So the process has been good, though, tough.
Caroline, thank you. I think you've done an excellent job as well, and Joe, so thank you.
Yeah, the fact that it's tough sometimes just shows that there's like a lot of tough things discussed, but being willing to have those conversations is what matters. So we're working on it, trying to get done.
I appreciate tough discussions, as, constructive and not just kind of rolling through a process, so.
That's exactly right, because we don't get anywhere unless we address the issues head on.
Exactly. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, time for everyone's favorite motion.
I make a motion that we adjourn for the evening.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Call vote?
Roll call vote. We'll start with you, Tom.
Tom Myers, aye.
William Olson, aye.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill Wilson, aye.
Caroline Beaulieu, aye. Thanks to everybody. Appreciate it. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.